The early release of Esteban Ocon by Alpine appears to have divided the F1 community, where some are saying it's harsh and unfair, and some are saying it makes sense and it is the next logical step. Where ultimately the argument is, oh come on, it's just one more race, versus, what? It's just one more race. Furthermore, the heartstrings were pulled by Ocon even tighter when he uploaded pictures of his tribute crash helmet that he was due to wear for the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, his last, or what would have been his last at Alpine. Now, all of this apparently is off the back of an agreement that was struck so that Ocon could take place in the post-season test with his new team Haas immediately after the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. But the ultimate thing here for Ocon is that he couldn't just have his cake and eat it. He couldn't compete in his final Grand Prix at Alpine at Abu Dhabi, and then as soon as that's finished, walk down the pits and then jump in a Haas and then crack on with the next stage in his career. And it would appear things just don't work like that. But then again, maybe it does work like that, because Fernando Alonso, after he crossed the line at Abu Dhabi to finish his final race with Alpine, he was allowed to jump in of Aston Martin the following day and test for them in the postseason race. So it just kind of shows the inconsistencies and mismanagement that we've been seeing at Alpine so far this season. And yes, so this decision can play into the ongoing theme that we've seen at Alpine so far this season of mismanagement and odd decisions, or it could play into an entirely new theme that we're seeing with Alpine, where the team are just not taking any crap anymore and are not afraid for making big, harsh, tough, bold decisions. And to be honest with you, since they've taken over, the general message I'm getting from Oaks and Briatore is that the messing is over. The rebuild at Alpine starts now. But from what I've been reading on the internet and from posts and everything about Ocon being dropped by Alpine, it seems to be a whole battle of emotion and logic, those two factors combining from the F1 community. But as I like to do here at the Gridgab, I like to try and carve through the rubbish and deliver you the reality of the situation. So while we're at it, let's get into it. Now, straight away, as soon as the announcement was made, the general feeling among the F1 community was one of sympathy and harsh treatment on Ocon's part, especially after being at the team for 5 seasons, where he contributed a win and 3 podiums, most recently in Brazil, which was fantastic. So the feeling was that he deserved more than this. He warranted a bigger send-off or a bigger goodbye. Bearing in mind, though, this is just from the fan base viewing the situation from the outside in. And to capitalise on this further, the marketing department of Team Ocon decided to release a statement on Esteban's social media and also post pictures of what would have been his crash helmet design for the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. A general tribute to the team, his successes there, and also the colour and design harks back to 2021 and what were happier times for Alpine and Ocon himself. A fantastic way to ride the publicity wave and also kind of twist the knife a little bit in the hearts of passionate F1 fans. Now, from my perspective, viewing situations like this emotionally is kind of a dead end, and considering the sort of season that Ocon has had with Alpine and the kind of tense relationship he's had with this team through the season, it seems like it would be a decision for the greater good that he gets out now. After all, the Alpine team principal Oliver Oaks labelled this decision as one that suits everyone. And I, for one, kind of understand that. After all, Oaks and Briatore have got a lot of responsibility on their hands and are trying to transform this sad, mismanaged, misfiring team into a slick, well-oiled, efficient operation for 2025 and onwards. Alpine, after all, have had to lay off 300 staff members in the process of this between Enstone and Viry de Chatillon, in a process that Briatore has called spring cleaning. And Briatore has really been taking the lead in trying to transform this operation and remind the staff that they are working for a racing team and not a car manufacturer. And like any good racing team would, when an opportunity is presented to them that will benefit them in the long run and maybe create a few less headaches, they would absolutely snatch it, i.e. the situation with Esteban Ocon. Especially when it's an opportunity where, on the face of it, everybody wins. And this is where I don't understand the kind of outrage that's been pouring out over Alpine dropping Ocon for the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. I get that it's a shame and he won't have that one last final goodbye at Alpine, but so what? Many drivers don't get that final goodbye that they really want, and many of them don't get to finish their careers as they would have liked to. And despite all the stuff on social media, I guarantee Ocon is delighted that this whole Alpine saga is over and that he can now get on with his new life at Haas. Now, in contrast, if he didn't have a drive for next season and he was dropped in order to give Jack Doohan his debut and some more experience, yes, I would agree that would be quite a cold and cruel decision to be made, especially at this point of the season. But from what what I gather and from what I've read, Ocon clearly wanted to have this Haas postseason test more than he wanted to compete in his final Grand Prix at Alpine. I mean, don't forget, he could have quite easily said no to Oaks and Briatore and enforced the terms of his contract. So if I were you, I wouldn't totally buy this whole thing that he's disappointed and this is not how he wanted things to end. Because guess what? He's moving from a team which is pretty much kind of heading in a decline versus a team which is on the upswing, which is Haas. And guess what? That statement that was put out on social media, that is something that is cooked up and concocted by a whole management and PR team that is operating behind him. If you think he really wrote that, well, it's a bit of a tall order, I think. Guaranteed, it's a campaign to get as much sympathy as he possibly can. Ocon and all his people know exactly what they're doing. Of course, he may not be able to have his cake and eat it, as I said earlier, but he can get pretty close to it with a statement such as this. And yes, it does a fantastic job of pulling on the heartstrings and prodding that emotional side of the F1 fans, but that is what it was literally designed to do. But despite that statement and the general feeling of sympathy towards Ocon from this whole thing, I sense that actually Esteban, he comes out of this whole thing as one of the biggest winners. A much bigger winner than you actually think. After all, he gets his postseason test with Haas, a bit of a mental break, and now can get cracking with his new drive straight away and arrive at the first race in Australia suited and booted, ready to go. Because the alternative after this, after the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, he can be loitering around, feeling useless, kicking his heels and itching for 2024 to tick into 2025 so that he can finally start cracking at Haas. He can now just get on with it. It's kind of like at work when you have to work your notice period after securing a new role somewhere else, and now whether that means working your notice period of 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, it's still something that you would rather just get through so that you can crack on with the next thing on your journey. It's that notice period where you feel like you're just in limbo. And if you had been in that situation, wouldn't you have just loved it if your boss said, look, let's just call it quits now. You want to get on with your thing. We need to get on with our thing. Let's just call it a day. That is literally the dream for everybody, and I sense that is exactly what has happened here with Alpine and Ocon. Everybody gets to move on to the next phase faster. There's no time wasting, and it's kind of a clean cut and a clean end to what has been a rapidly deteriorating relationship between Alpine and Ocon. Even from Alpine's perspective, this gives them the unique opportunity to give Jack Doohan his debut early and get rid of any of the nerves or butterflies he might have prior to the Australian Grand Prix next season. And by the way, for Jack Doohan, who was recently at the headlines for being touted to be about to lose his drive to the likes of Franco Colapinto, what a turnaround this is. But also for Alpine, I do admire this new fresh sense of urgency and purpose for them to be willing to draw a line over what has been a fairly terrible 2024 season and start a new era, a fresh era, with all the advantages and opportunities available to them. And yes, it would have been nice for Ocon to have one last hurrah and for him to wear his tribute helmet and everything, but I'm sorry, Esteban, Alpine simply do not have time for that. They have to do what's best for the team and all of its staff, and not just to benefit a single driver. After all, there are still hundreds of staff back in the UK and France who understandably might be feeling a little unsure about their future, especially if that future at Alpine is based on performance. Of course, Renault have shut down their F1 engine building operation in Viry-de-Châtillon, and there's no telling, I suppose, if they might just pull the plug altogether. We might see the bottom fall out of this team completely unless something massive happens. And so with all those sort of factors at play, are we supposed to feel sorry for Ocon not getting that final goodbye and getting his ego topped up one last time? Of course we're not. He completely agreed to all of this. He clearly wanted that Haas test at the end of the season more than the final drive with Alpine. But from his part, it would play off very badly if that was admitted publicly. But something that is also very interesting and also very telling of the situation between Alpine and Ocon is that Alpine seem to be quite happy to let go of their race-winning, podium-scoring driver in favour of a rookie who has never turned the wheel of an F1 car in anger, right in the middle of a fight for 6th in the Constructors' Championship. And this tells me that despite all the cute and fluffy and cuddly words that are floating around on social media, towards the end of his time at Alpine, the team didn't really hold Ocon in that high regard. It's a sign that he hasn't really been that integral or valued by the team, and also that's particularly shocking considering, like I said, that fight with Haas for 6th in the Constructors' Championship is still on, and definitely a fight that Alpine could still win. Now, if it came down to it and you needed to get as many points as possible, would you not rather have Ocon in the car next to Gasly? I certainly would. After all, that surely must give you the best chance of scoring points rather than putting Doohan in the car next to Gasly. So, this surely serves an indication that the dynamic between Ocon and Alpine must be absolutely rotten by this stage. The very fact that Alpine would rather put their rookie in the car than Ocon and potentially lose 6th in the Constructors doesn't say good things about their opinion or relationship with Esteban. A relationship, of course, that would rather be ended at the earliest available opportunity, which is exactly what we saw just the other day. And looking back, you do kind of sense that Monaco was the last straw. That was the point where everything just went beyond the point of no return for Ocon and Alpine. It was kind of then that you knew that Gasly was kind of taking over as the senior driver and most valued driver in the team. The vibe has been a bit tense ever since. And combining this with Alpine screwing up Ocon's pit stop at the Las Vegas Grand Prix and Ocon screwing up Alpine's car at the first corner at Qatar, I think that led both parties to have this initial conversation. Although I wouldn't be surprised if the foundations of this whole thing was laid a little bit before Qatar as well. In fact, the wheels were probably in motion well before the Qatar Grand Prix. And also from Ocon's perspective, cutting ties with this team that he joined in 2020 that has now become this sort of degraded, mutated version of that Renault team that he signed up for is really no bad thing and not really one that we should really feel sorry for him about. He's seen the team go through different leaders, ideas, directions, endless 5-year plans, and it is probably something that he's equally fed up with. The mood inside that Alpine team this season must have been horrific, and if there is an opportunity to break free from this and immerse yourself in an optimistic, exuberant Haas team under Ao Komatsu, then why the hell not, even if it is at the earliest opportunity. For Ocon, it is such an advantage now for him to call it quits and start work at Haas as soon as possible, so that he gets to know the crew, the car, the team ethos, everything about the team, so he can start at the season opener at Australia with every advantage available to him. Now, I know there's nothing to confirm this as well, but I wouldn't be surprised if he gave his old teammates, old Fernando Alonso, a little phone call before this whole decision was made, just to kind of get some experience and insight on this whole situation. Because after all, Alonso did drop Alpine for Aston Martin, so he probably has some wise words to give. So all in all, this whole thing of Alpine releasing Ocon early. It's a shame that Qatar was the last time we'll see him in an Alpine, but also I'm not exactly fainting with disbelief either. The split was a long time coming, and it's incredibly advantageous to call it quits now so that both parties can go their own separate ways and achieve what they want to achieve. The long-term benefits of splitting now are far greater than trying to hold it together until the end of the season. And if Ocon does manage to reinvigorate his career at Haas, it will be a decision that long in the future you'll be well glad that he made. So there we are, guys. Thanks for watching. Please be sure to like, share and subscribe as always. I'm Paul, this is the Gridgab, and I'll see you later. Cheers.